10-minute murder.
In 1983, the Woodford Slasher was terrorizing residents of Bellevue, Nebraska. 2 boys had been brutally murdered, and the community was terrified. The playgrounds were abandoned, bikes laid unused in yards, and the local scoutmaster gathered his troop for a lesson on how to stay safe in hopes of preventing another victim. The Assistant ScoutMaster shared, "As long as we look out for one another, we'll have nothing to worry about." That Assistant ScoutMaster was John Joubert. John Joseph Joubert IV was born in 1963 in Lawrence, Massachusetts. He was an extremely intelligent child, reading by the age of 3. At age 6, his parents got divorced after his father tried to strangle his mother. Perhaps it's here where his sadistic fantasies started, since it was around that age that he would later recall thinking about stabbing his babysitter. He even admitted to having thoughts about biting off parts of her flesh. Pretty unusual thoughts for a 6-year-old. In 1974, his mother moved them to Portland, Maine, where he had a difficult time getting along with the kids at school and was considered a vicious bully, although he was charismatic and knew how to manipulate adults to avoid trouble, except for at home. His mother was controlling and often humiliated him. She even spanked him until he was almost as big as she was. Considered an outcast, Joubert joined the Boy Scouts of America to meet people, and he excelled in the program. He reached the highest achievement and became an Eagle Scout, something less than 5% of members have accomplished. Yet all the skill sets that he learned would not necessarily be used for good. By 13, his sadistic fantasies were sliding into the real world. He stabbed a 9-year-old girl with a pencil. The incident was so intoxicating to him that the next day he slashed another kid with a razor. He felt sexually stimulated by the events. He later attacked 2 boys, brutally beating and robbing them. In the midst of the chaos, he managed to maintain his normal life, but was getting bolder with every attack. In 1981, he graduated from Cheverus High School. Soon after, he enlisted in the United States Air Force. He had succeeded in the Boy Scouts, and the military seemed like a great career choice. He was stationed at the base near Bellevue, Nebraska, although the area would soon not be safe as it once was. On September 18, 1983, 13-year-old Danny Eberly disappeared while on his newspaper route. It was discovered that he was missing after customers started complaining that they had not yet received their newspaper. Danny's bike was found at a house on his route with all the undelivered papers. His brother, who usually worked with Danny, had no idea where he would have gone, but did report seeing a white male in a tan car driving around. Since it was considered a child abduction, the FBI was called in. They immediately started searching in hopes that they would find Danny alive. After 3 days of searching, his body was found in tall grass off a gravel road about 4 miles from where his bike was found. Danny was in his underwear. His feet and hands were bound with rope. His mouth was covered with tape. He had been beaten, choked, bitten, and stabbed 9 times. His heart, liver, and lungs had been punctured. A star-like marking had been carved into his chest. The local authorities feared that this was the beginning of a nightmare. They started investigating known pedophiles that lived around the area. They brought in one man that had molested 2 young boys. He not only failed the polygraph, but his alibi did not hold up. Due to lack of evidence, he was released. A couple months went by and the authorities had no new leads. However, an FBI head profiler had started putting together a profile. He also thought the rope used on Danny was crucial to the case. The FBI had never seen that rope. It was so distinctive, with 26 fibers and 106 colors. They knew that if they could find the rest of the rope, they would probably find their killer. On December 2nd, 1983, 12-year-old Christopher Walden went missing while walking to school. He disappeared 3 miles from where Danny Eberly's body was found. His family had very little hope that he would be found alive, and their worst fears were confirmed. Christopher's body was found 3 days later, 5 miles from town. His body, discovered by hunters, had been better concealed than Danny's. But the crime scene did have some differences. His throat was slit so deeply that he was almost decapitated, and he was not bound. Other than that, there were too many similarities to not connect the crimes. He was found in his underwear and had a star-like marking carved into his chest. The media was calling the killer the Woodford Slasher. An elderly woman saw Christopher on the news. She called and reported seeing a boy that looked like him abducted by a white male in a tan car. She didn't really believe that she saw such a horrible thing happen until she recognized the boy on the news. On January 11, 1984, a daycare teacher noticed a man circling the area. She found it suspicious and went outside to get a better look at the car. The man noticed that she was writing down his license plate and parked the vehicle. He started to approach her and acted like he needed directions. However, as he got closer, he pulled out a knife. She took off running back to the building and managed to get inside and call the police. The license plate belonged to a rental car. The car was currently rented out to John Joubert. His car was in the shop. His tan car. With a search warrant in hand, the FBI approached Joubert's barracks. They found a hunting knife and the exact rope they were looking for. They also found hair and pieces of the rope in his car. The rope had been made in Korea for the U.S. military. Joubert got the rope from the scoutmaster he served under. Joubert was also an exact match for the FBI's profile. While being questioned, John Joubert admitted that he planned on robbing the teacher and acknowledged that he had heard of the boys, but denied anything else. When he was then shown pictures of the crimes, he was noticeably aroused. Even eventually admitted, "I did it. I killed those boys." And what may or may not be shocking, he admitted that if given another chance, he would kill again. Even though Joubert confessed to the murders, he intended to plead not guilty. After psychiatric evaluations, they decided that he was in his right mind when the crimes were committed, although he was characterized as having obsessive-compulsive disorder, sadistic tendencies, and schizoid personality disorder. But since he couldn't claim insanity, he changed his plea to guilty, hoping to get mercy from the court. The court in Nebraska did not show mercy and sentenced him to death. The case of the two boys from Nebraska was used in a training session at the FBI Academy in Quantico. It was there that an officer from Portland, Maine, noticed similarities with an unsolved case in his jurisdiction. On August 22, 1982, 11-year-old Ricky Stetson went for a jog on the Back Cove Trail. His parents called the police when he wasn't home by dark. That was the rule for many kids before the days of cell phones: be home by dark. When he didn't show up, they started to worry. The next day, a motorist discovered his body off the side of Interstate 295. He was dead and bloodied. Originally, they thought he must have been hit by a car, but upon further inspection, they knew that the cause of death was much more sinister, and the autopsy confirmed it. He had been stabbed multiple times in the stomach, strangled, and had bite marks on his body. A suspect was apprehended and spent a year and a half in jail before they confirmed that the bite marks did not match his teeth. The officer was able to confirm that Joubert lived in Maine at the time of the crime, and the bite marks on the victim did match Joubert. They were actually able to link him to several unsolved crimes and identified him as the Oakdale Slasher, a killer that they had been looking for. Joubert stood trial in Maine and received a life sentence, maybe only because they didn't have the death penalty. He was then sent back to Nebraska, where he faced the electric chair. He appealed multiple times, but his sentence was never overturned. He sat down in that electric chair on July 17, 1996. Apparently, some people believed he should be shown more kindness than his victims were. Despite the fact that Joubert committed such horrifying crimes on children, after his death, activists said the electric chair was unusually cruel and called for action to be taken. Nebraska now administers lethal injection. At the hands of John Joubert IV, at least 3 boys met a tragic and painful death, not to mention all the other people he harmed physically and mentally over the years. Even though he never sexually molested any of his victims, he was aroused by the cutting and the biting. And the questions remain: was he trying to satisfy abnormal sexual desires, or was it more about power and control? Did it come from trauma in his childhood? Aristotle argued that morality must be taught. Could it be that he was never taught good? No. He was an Eagle Scout and went to Catholic school. Maybe he was a master manipulator, a chameleon that could thrive in any setting. By 20 years old, Joubert had already terrorized 2 communities, becoming both the Woodford Slasher and the Oakdale Slasher. He was a man that signed up to serve his country and parents trusted with their young boys. Had he not been caught so soon and moved to more Air Force bases, who knows how many communities could have been affected. Evil doesn't always wear horns. Sometimes it wears a uniform. That's 10-Minute Murder for today. Brief and bingeable true crime. My name is Joe. I'm the host, and thank you so much. I really appreciate you listening to the podcast today. If you happen to be a new listener to 10-Minute Murder, I'm super happy that you're here. Welcome. Make yourself comfortable and subscribe so that you can more easily catch up on all the back episodes. If you haven't connected with me on social media, do that. You can see pictures of what we talk about here in the podcast, and not to worry, it's not gross and graphic stuff. If you like this episode, leave a rating and review on Apple, Spotify, any place that's possible. Your positive feedback is very much appreciated. Very quickly, let's read an email since I haven't done that in the last few episodes. Hi, Joe. My sister and I love your podcast and discuss the cases after listening to your take on them all the time. My question is, are you good at saying tongue twisters? We know you can barely pronounce names, but you seem to be good with everything else. Please say this phrase. A box of mixed biscuits in a biscuit mixer. A box of mixed biscuits in a biscuit mixer. That is kind of tough. I can say it, but it's not easy. A box of mixed biscuits in a biscuit mixer. Yeah, it's tough, but I can normally do those. I don't know why, but that's just something I've been able to do, and it's absolutely useless, to be honest. Kaylee, thank you and your sister so much for listening. I love Nashville, by the way. It's a fantastic city, apparently where everyone goes for bachelorette parties. Anytime I'm in Nashville, if you get around Broadway, you can't stir them with a stick. Bachelorette parties everywhere. Okay, that's it. That is the end of this episode. But if you're on to the next one, I'll see you there. But if not, have a good night. Or morning or afternoon.